Look, this is all a crisscross of discontentment, strikes, poor funding, racism, deprivation, the list goes on and on. But this has all been coming for a long time. I've been looking at people's experiences of using the NHS. Now, so sad to see things like the staff were overwhelmed, people who are 91 years old sitting on chairs for 20 hours, or even more than that, people being seen in corridors, unnecessary waits, ambulance strikes. Now look, very recently in the middle of a very busy clinic, someone from the BBC rang and they wanted to talk about what was going on. And side by side, hearing what I had to say alongside others, one thing that stood out is that this has all been coming for a very long time. Now, albeit I didn't have very long to prepare, but I hope what I said was of some value. There were some really visceral truths in there, and I think they came straight from the heart, and perhaps you can hear that too.
Dr. Talha Sami, excellent to have you on as well. Have you seen it worse than this?
No, I don't. It's a pleasure to be here, and sadly, I don't think it's ever been this bad. I mean, to people using this health system, I can hear from all their stories. They appreciate the amazing nurses, cleaners, doctors. And, look, as a junior doctor going back many years, I remember the extra hours and the waits, but this is worse than what it's ever been. And you mentioned the theme of broken Britain. This is a bigger picture. There are wider issues of austerity, discontentment. The lovely A&E consultant mentioned social care. There are people using food banks. I've never seen anything like this before. And this is coming from systematic defunding that has gone on for decades, outsourcing to the private sector. Sadly, doctors are hesitant to speak on political issues, but I think, look, we all love the NHS so much, and it's one of the greatest institutions of this country. And to see and hear the stories of it's so sad, it's so heartbreaking. That's not why any of us got into it. It honestly makes me so upset to hear what people are going through.
Now, as I said there, I think a lot of attention needs to go to how this could have been prevented. Now let's have a look at the bigger picture. The system is being engineered strategically for this to occur. We had one health secretary that wrote about how to privatise the NHS. We have another health secretary that was selling contracts to his mates. When is enough enough? When are we going to say stop? Now, another thing I wanted to talk about, looking at the statistics and what's been going on, is that doctors have been going abroad for years. This is nothing new. They're leaving the NHS to go to places like Australia, New Zealand. Now, it's not even just doctors doing this, it's nurses too. So we have to point this out. Why are they leaving? There is a problem that we need to speak about.
There is one doctor who's been writing, it's in the Mail today, I did mention it earlier on, it's a pretty hard-hitting piece, and it's a guy called Rob Galloway, an A&E doctor for 22 years. He's drawn up a 6-point plan for what the government could be doing, discharging medically fit people into private hospitals and hotels, and even COVID Nightingale hospitals staffed by the army. He wants to see ministers heed calls for a national incident to be declared. There are other what the article I read describes as politically unpalatable options. But the point there, are we at the point of, Cobra getting together, or Cobra, I can never say it, and, is this a national incident? Is this a national crisis, Talha?
Yes, I would say so. And look, these solutions this doctor has thought out, this is end game solutions. These things were all foreseeable. This has been coming for decades. The people that are leaving this country as doctors to go to Australia, to New Zealand, we should be staying here. Why are there people doing that if they're not content? Staff morale is down, doctors are working extra hours, there are not enough nurses. This stuff was foreseeable. I think if I look in the longer term, its changes start now, and those changes include reforming the social services. They involve getting doctors into this system immediately. I think things can change, but we need to think of a short-term and a long-term strategy. And when you have the impact of COVID, when you have the impact of austerity, when you have the impact of people leaving this health system, whether it's doctors or nurses, this is what's going to happen, so sadly.
Let's talk about what nobody's talking about right now, mental health. It seems to have been the key word of the past few years. Mental health services have suffered tremendously in the past few decades, despite the UK being at the forefront of the boundaries of developing mental health research. Now, we can probably all relate to that, having gone through our own trials and tribulations in the COVID pandemic, right?
Okay, if COVID had not happened, where would we be now?
I think this would still be coming, but just shunted along, maybe, a couple of years, decade or so. Remember, the population is still aging, so that bottleneck is still going to occur, isn't it, at some point? Longer term funding, better solutions, governments that actually are willing to invest. I mean, you asked this doctor earlier, where should money be put? definitely social care, but money is not being funded directly to the end point where the user is benefiting from it. Personally, as a doctor, when Captain Tom did this amazing thing, raised all of this money, I did not see where that money went. It was not used positively from what I can see. Perhaps maybe other callers can tell me they saw the benefit of that.
So it's all sucked into a kind of vortex. That's why people need to think, and we should have this discussion on this phone very, very soon.
Now I'm going to say something that might be a bit controversial, because people don't like speaking about this. As part of my faith, I believe it's my duty to serve, and I stand alongside another million NHS workers. As part of the BAME community, we're the ones that bear the brunt of a lot of this too, and it's been that way for 100 years. And I want to contextualise this because I think context is everything. Going back 100 years, it was British Indian soldiers that fought for Britain in World War I and World War II. When the immigration rush occurred, we came forward, the BAME community that is, to build up this country in a way that hadn't been done before. And the same thing happened in COVID as well. If you looked at key services where there were petrol pumps, taxi drivers, even doctors and nurses, where were they coming from? Now true, we're only a small proportion, but it's a significant proportion of the entire NHS. Now there are many layers to strategical racism, institutional racism, healthcare inequality, deprivation, poverty, austerity, discontent, strikes, the list goes on. But I do think we need to step forward, we need to look at what's going on, and we need to see that it's been a long time coming. The thing that gets me is that this is really painful, for me to see a service that I've loved so much, I've given so much to be in, and it's just falling apart in front of our eyes.